Welcome to HerSuccess, the brand new podcast that's all about what's happening right now in technology and what matters most to women in the industry. Sponsored by Engtal, one of America's leading technology and engineering staffing firms. On today's episode, Kait Krause, Associate Business Manager at Engtal, chats to Ellen Orange, Engtal's Senior Marketing Coordinator, about the recent AI boom, the spaces she's currently working in, and what AI means for the future of tech.
Welcome back to HerSuccess podcast. My name is Ellen and I'm Senior Marketing Coordinator for Engtal. Today I'm joined by Kait Krause, Associate Business Manager at Engtal, and today we're going to talk about the recent AI boom and trends in AI and machine learning. Hi Kait, welcome to HerSuccess podcast. So could you just introduce yourself and the space you're working in right now?
Hi, Ellen. Thanks so much for having me. I lead the recruitment team that specializes in quantitative research, portfolio management, and trading, as well as machine learning and data, for the most innovative companies in the US, as well as from small tech startups all the way up to, well-established companies who've been around for quite some time.
That's great. Thank you. So this episode is all about the AI boom that we've seen in the last 6 months or so. I just wanted to ask, what kind of exciting developments in the world of AI have you seen with clients at Engtal?
Yeah, I think, a lot of our clients have been trying to push more into that like clean tech space, really with that energy supply and more sustainable supply chain, as well as like healthcare, using AI tools to predictive measures for cancer or early onset of, Alzheimer's or other kinds of diseases in that sense to make sure that people have like a better outcome. We've also seen it in, the financial space as well, when it comes to, early conversations around that trading side of things. So I think, there's a lot of different areas in which we're seeing this, up and coming, which is really exciting for us.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think so many people, hear about AI and they think like, oh, chat GPT and generative AI, but actually it's got so many more applications across so many sectors, like you were just saying. So obviously we know that interest in like AI, generative AI has been making headlines. It seems like the market's booming. Is that the case?
Yeah, the global artificial intelligence market, is projected to grow at north of 37%, from 2022 to 2030. Last year, 2022 alone, 35% of businesses worldwide used AI. And another 91% of, leading businesses are currently having ongoing investments in artificial intelligence. And I just think that kind of shows that, we are looking to kind of boost our workplaces, benefit by, having that support to, make sure we're productive and, being able to drive the business forward.
Yeah, that actually kind of really puts it into perspective. It's not just buzzy headlines, is it? It's actually like some serious kind of innovations and change that's happening in the space.
Yeah. And just being even like creative. I think that's, all it's very engineering focused, but it's also that creativity that brought these ideas to fruition. I think, being able to automate and being able to like forecast 40% of domestic chores for the next 10 years, that's a cool thing to do. Because think of how much time you spend washing your floors or folding your laundry or like little things like that, around the house, cleaning the bathrooms. So those things that they are automated, that time you give back, the cleaner your house is, the better your environment you're working in, those all have on yourself as well.
Yeah, there's so many applications. That's really interesting. I know that one of the areas that you've specialized quite a lot in, is that data and machine learning behind AI. I think particularly in quantitative research and trading. So could you just tell us a little bit more about that space?
Yeah, I think it's like a really cool space to be a part of. A lot of the times right now, they're doing a lot of that ML modeling, building those out or machine learning models for prediction and valuation of stocks, depending on like what kind of desk they're on and being able to really be on the forefront then of what they're trading. And so using that, they're able to kind of see both historical data and be able to analyze that for future trades, but also see kind of predictions within movements of the market, based on behaviors of bigger financial institutions or social behavior.
Yeah, that's so exciting. It sounds really innovative. So, in terms of some of those specific uses of AI prediction modeling tools, can you talk us through some specific applications, some of how that might work? I know that some companies are using like sentiment analysis and different models like that.
Yeah. So as far as that, I just know kind of very high overview and kind of what I've like read more. So, I'm not super technical, so don't want to like overstate any of these things, but I think a lot of the pattern recognition I look into, as you mentioned, sedimentation, text summarization. Those are kind of like the big buzzwords that you might see when you're looking at some of these articles, data extraction. So I think trying to be competitive in those areas to then implement these AI models, and even with the newest like ChatGPT, kind of starting that conversation.
That's really interesting. Yeah, so I know that this is a really specialist and highly competitive market. What would be some of the skills that companies might look for in this space?
Yeah, so I think it really depends on like where they're at on the scale of automation. And I think that's the first thing to kind of look at. Are they more of a fundamental approach, or are they more a systematic approach? Those two models are definitely, there can be a hybrid of that. But I think that's kind of like the first kind of piece, is wondering how technical your trader may be, or if your quantitative researcher using more machine modeling, because that's kind of what you guys are looking towards. And the same thing with like, what kind of company are you? You're high frequency trading versus more investment and doing a bit longer strategies versus shorter strategies. It also depends on what tooling you will need in order to be successful and make those trades and beat other people out on the market.
Yeah, that makes sense. So typically, would you be looking for people with strong data experience, strong machine learning experience? Is it dependent on what they're implementing?
Yeah, I'd say it's kind of dependent on what they're implementing. It's also dependent on, the team structure, especially also if you're a trader versus, quantitative researcher. I think on the trading side, there's some companies who are doing automation, and it's kind of like something that they really cherish or really value, that like Python coding experience and being able to do those quick changes like on the fly. Whereas some companies, they're a little more on like the manual side of things, not much doing the automation. But they have other people helping them out in the background when they need to make those changes. You think on the quantitative researcher side, same thing. Like there's so many different kinds of people. Some are doing more on the machine learning side, some are not. Some have higher Sharpe ratios, some don't. And it really depends on like what they're trading, how much they're trading, what their capital is. So a lot of those things go into play to kind of find the right candidate for the client.
Yeah, that makes sense. So obviously from, the conversation that we've had so far, it's really clear that, AI and machine learning aren't just the domain of tech companies anymore. They're really being adopted across a wide number of industries. And I'm just wondering, what is the biggest challenge for these companies when it comes to implementing AI?
Yeah, so I think part of it is finding the right candidate for the role. And one of our clients recently mentioned to us that their machine learning is just like this really exciting term, and there's different levels and different depths of knowledge, with experience. And I think some people can have been in the field for 5 or 6 years of experience, but how they're doing machine learning and building out their models could be more pre-packaged versus building those out from scratch. And I think that's something different, that some clients, they're doing everything from the ground up and making sure that that machine learning scientist has that same ability to start from the ground up, be able to build those pipelines, understand the whys, understand if they were to use this tooling, what is the impact on the model? What is the impact then on the business? Is there alternative ways that doesn't work, versus people who've had a little more of the pre-packaged experience? Not saying one is right or wrong. It's just depending on what the company's needs are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, another aspect of this in terms of those challenges, I was reading about, the need for diversity of experience and ensuring that you've got a diverse range of people working on these models as well. We've heard some fairly high profile instances of models that have like managed to learn human biases because of the way that they've been trained. Is it right to say that companies are quite concerned with making sure that they have people who are representative of the wider community kind of at the table when it comes to building out this tech?
Yeah, I think again, it will depend on if it's an internal model, that's going to be a different kind of reflection upon the people who are building that versus if it's an external model for a client and kind of bringing in those clients' needs and making sure that then that prototype works for that client. But I do agree that the end of the day, there's so many things that are being able to push AI forward and being able to make sure that we're being just the awareness as well first and foremost of, are we taking into consideration biasm or differentiation or diversity and inclusion, and making sure that we are having those checks and balances in place, or doing everything we can until we're able to fully get something that works 100% of the time.
Yeah, that's really crucial, I think. Okay, so with this kind of widespread adoption of AI happening, I think the figures now is like half of all businesses are looking to implement AI into their workplace in some form. Should general engineers be looking to upskill in AI?
Yeah, so I think there's different areas in which you can upskill AI, and it really depends again on like which areas you're going into. A lot of things we're seeing in that clean space, area, we're seeing more of like the sustainability experience, but even like the geospatial, those are well recognized areas in which we're seeing people gravitate towards. But I would say technology changes so quickly, staying up to date with the top tools and technologies, going to conferences, education is super important, but also the continuing education, I think, is going to be the best answer I can really give for this question, just because of how quickly things change. Like, for example, if you think about ChatGPT 3, ChatGPT 4 came out pretty quickly. And you think about the iPhone, like how quickly does the new iPhone come out? Like it's just things are evolving ever so quickly that I think the best advice to like future engineers is just making sure that you are ingrained in what you're doing your research, knowing what's the latest and greatest, just like anyone who wants to be innovative within their space does. Right? HR person, they're looking to see what's the best tools to continue to pushing them forward. So that's kind of the best area I can give, because I think it is kind of dependent on what niche is theirs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I guess you don't necessarily have to like totally change your career path, but it's definitely worth like being aware of the tools and technologies, right?
Yeah, and I think you brought up a really great point there, is that by age 30, most people, they either make a decision and stay with what they're doing, or they may change again. I would say, the average person does and can change careers, 3 to 7 times over their working lives, which, is crazy. And, 60% of workers currently today are in occupations that didn't exist in 1940s. So seeing how change can be scary, but it's also impactful, because think about like how cars are today versus how they were back in the day. A microwave, all these things that help better our lives. It is an area then we have to kind of change our course a little bit. Pushing ourselves in the uncomfortable is what makes us better.
Yeah, that kind of leads me on really nicely into my next question, which was going to be around, those concerns that people have had with the negative potential of AI. A lot of people thinking, will Chat GPT replace my job? Things like how models learn those biases. And I know, so Geoffrey Hinton, who is known as one of the godfathers of AI from Google, has warned of the risks of it in the coming decades. So it's just like what your thoughts were around that, and should we be thinking about how to develop AI more ethically?
Yeah. So, I do think that obviously AI will take away jobs, but I think it will also create jobs, as we've seen in some of these reports. I think a lot of it will create new employment opportunities in the sense of what we thought we could do within machine learning. We didn't probably necessarily think we could do that 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And so I just think that idea generation, what we're going to see coming, from AI moving forward and the automation side of things will allow people to be more creative. We see that in people doing generative text to image. And people think that they could do that like 5, 10 years ago. I don't know. So I think those are cool opportunities that we should see them as an area to improve versus being scared.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I think it's one of those things, all technological advances that we've experienced have come with this kind of fear of the future and what it'll bring. It's not really different when the internet first came around or other developments that we've had like that. So it has its risks, but I guess it's got plenty of opportunities at the same time, right?
Yeah. And like what you mentioned, some of the ethical side of things, again, I think that's why it's really important to still have that human component to a lot of these pieces, especially when it comes to recruitment, being able to make sure that we understand that we're taking these steps to eliminate bias or eliminate names or locations of candidates, whatever it may be. Just knowing that there could be errors that come up with that, and how do we navigate then and kind of adapt and have that second kind of checks and balance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's always going to be an element where we have to work alongside the technology rather than it completely replacing everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, you mentioned recruitment there. That's actually a space where AI is really growing in popularity. I've seen it being used for things like scanning resumes, grading video interviews. What do you think about the use of AI for that?
Yeah, so, personally, when I send over a resume to a client, I not only send the resume, but I also have like a nice little summary about the candidate. And that sometimes can or cannot reflect, completely within the resume. Because at the end of the day, the resume is supposed to be a guide and a talking point for clients and not necessarily have everything in it, all their accomplishments in there, because it could be a long kind of resume. So I do think like the scanning of resumes can really help with getting candidates in faster, potential higher conversion rate, but just also kind of understanding that there's areas that we as recruiters will talk to that candidate, learn about that candidate, and maybe add in more information that may not be within their resume or is just touched upon. And if it's not scattered all the way through their resume pretty thickly, it may be something that these models may overlook or don't push to the top of the queue because of that reason. And that would be kind of a shame to pass over great candidates because of that. Working with different kinds of video interviews, to screen candidate remotely, that's another area where you guys kind of taking a step up and being able to try to, reduce bias in recruitment by removing identifying information or different features that may cause bias towards one kind of person or another. And I think the last thing is you'll be able to predict in the future. There will probably be a lot of different tools to see, different trends in that company's hiring needs and kind of what can be up and coming. That way they can kind of support that growth versus trying to catch up, once they have all this work on, and it's more of like we sink or swim.
Yeah, that's so interesting, that data aspect, and I guess making predictions on maybe things like seasonal or market forecasts or things like that, and then knowing how many people you might need to hire based on that. That's really fascinating. I think as well, what you mentioned about things like the grading video interviews, I've read about how that it can actually have an adverse impact on some candidates. I think especially for neurodiverse people, it's been proven to adversely affect them in the interview process. I know that some of these tools have been a little bit controversial because of that. And I think recently New York brought in some legislation saying that employers have to actually audit the tools for potential biases and let candidates know when they're being used, so that people are aware that they're being evaluated by them. Do you think that's a useful step forward?
I think it's an interesting talking point because not every candidate is going to classify themselves in certain categories or certain boxes. And so they don't want to potentially, lose out on opportunity either, because they may need special requirements or may need special assistance in certain things. So I do think that does take into account whether they want to speak up about it or they want to have those different kinds of accommodations made for them. Because at the end of the day, when there's competitive companies you're trying to be a part of, you want to be as competitive as possible, and you want to put yourself in like the best light at the beginning. I'm not saying you're not putting yourself in the best light, but I think sometimes there's this kind of negative connotation when you have to ask for help.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that definitely makes sense. And I guess it's just about making sure that if we are implementing these new technologies, that we consider the impact that they have on everyone, right? So yeah, that's really interesting. I think obviously it's a developing space and we're going to potentially see an awful lot of change happening quite rapidly, even just in like AI and recruitment as well. So yeah, coming on to my final question, as someone working in the space and seeing these developments, seeing how fast everything is moving, how do you feel about the future of AI and machine learning? Are you excited? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it is really exciting. And I know at the end of the day, people just want to ensure that their ideas are getting across and trying to execute them. I think, when it comes to kind of building out these models and trying to make things better, making sure that we're thinking about our values, because it's hard for a machine to really convey the values of a company or the values of the product. And so I think that's just the one thing that, people are already mindful of, and just making sure that you're trying to improve for the betterment of moving things forward in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the thing. Sometimes we might get a little bit caught up in what the downsides of a technology might be, but actually AI is already achieving so much good in some of the things that you've talked about. You talked about how it's improving sustainability and healthcare and all of those like really exciting innovations. So yeah, I'm kind of keen to see where things go, definitely. Oh, well, thank you so much for your time, Kait. This was really interesting. And yeah, thank you to everyone for tuning in to the final episode of HerSuccess Season 1. Keep an eye out for Season 2 coming soon.
Thanks so much, Ellen, for having me.
Thank you.